With a series of studies showing the effectiveness of natural immunity, is it time for us to redefine the term fully vaccinated? Hello there, you 5.1 million awakening wonders on a journey together, mutually growing, a shared ascent out of the darkness, out of the ignorance, out of the bickering, the pointing and condemnation, into a new world, a new dawn where together we can create new systems through communication, openness, optimism, hope, faith. This is the way we need to go. That's what I reckon. And you can hear me talk more about that if you come see me live in Scarborough, Sheffield, Liverpool, Plymouth, Bristol, Glasgow. I'm all over the UK doing my fantastic show. I talk about the craziness of the last couple of years. You'll love it. We'll get together, get close, interact with each other in healthy, safe and loving ways. There's a link in the description if you fancy it. Now, today I want to talk to you about natural immunity. You will have noticed over the course of the last couple of years that there are points where it's impossible to talk about a certain subject, and then over time the conversation changes. This you'll have noticed in areas around vaccination, vaccine mandates, Wuhan lab leak theory, mask efficiency and efficacy. And today we're talking about natural immunity. This still has to be discussed with a great deal of caution. And I want to make very, very clear to you indeed that I have no opinion at all about what you should do for your health and the health of your family. I'm simply interested in us looking at information together and sensibly and responsibly coming to conclusions based on scientific information. This is Eric Topol, founder and director of the Scripps Research Translational Institute. The US Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has failed to recognize that people with confirmed COVID infections, also known as natural immunity, have achieved some level of protection against subsequent infections and severe disease. This has unnecessarily fueled divisiveness, particularly when vaccines are mandated without acknowledgement that prior COVID is an alternate path, albeit with some limitations, for protection of the individual and helping to build the population's immunity wall. I suppose what's being introduced here is the idea that if you've already had coronavirus for a period and the length of that period is still under discussion and observation, you have what is called natural immunity. While there has been a body of data supporting a robust immune response to COVID infections, that evidence has recently been substantially bolstered. In the very large trial on the Johnson & Johnson vaccine single shot compared with placebo, among over 2,000 participants with prior infections as documented by positive antibody status, their protection against moderate or severe disease was 90%. So, people that had previously had the infection had 90% immunity. That's very effective. We will perhaps see over the course of the article whether it's more effective than one vaccine or two vaccines with boosters. Because remember, we're not saying or offering an opinion along the lines of, oh, this is better or that's better. We're just looking at this information and then you can see what you think. That's much higher than the vaccine efficacy of 56%. So I suppose the reason that would become relevant is, for example, if you have a vaccine passport or green card or digital ID situation that allows you to travel if you've had a vaccine but doesn't allow you to travel if you have natural immunity, according to that data, that would be illogical, wouldn't it, I suppose? Yet the CDC recognises two-shot of this vaccine as fully vaccinated, but ignores these data and many other proof points of natural immunity protection. So it's saying that the US Centre of Disease Control perhaps needs to amend its assessment of what constitutes full vaccination. If by full vaccination you mean protected from carrying, transmitting or being infected by coronavirus, because that information, 90% effectiveness, natural immunity, and this is by Johnson & Johnson, by the way, who manufacture vaccines, and one might assume therefore profit from vaccines and therefore might assume would benefit from vaccines being more effective than natural immunity, have nevertheless come to this conclusion. In some cases, to get a digital ID or a green pass, you needed to have the 2 shots or the 3 shots. And remember how the mainstream media and the government vehemently condemned unvaccinated people for being irresponsible and spreading the disease. Well, this information suggests that they may have been better protected and less likely to spread it than some of the people that were criticising them. So doesn't that show you how irresponsible the corporate media and the government have been, not just in the message they were conveying, but the manner of the message, the social damage that was done, particularly now as the science suggests that they may have been wrong. In a recent CDC report for COVID in California that included the Delta wave, the cumulative hospitalization rate for the vaccinated was 0.7% among vaccinated and 0.3% unvaccinated with prior infection. Notably, a tenfold lower risk of subsequent infection was found in the people with natural immunity compared with those vaccinated in the Cleveland Clinic Health System study of over 52,000 employees. These reports convey a high level of protection of natural immunity, at times comparable to 2 shots vaccines. So those data suggest that natural immunity is at least as effective as 2 shots of the vaccine. Now, I know there'll be people watching this that are pro-vaccination. There'll be people watching this that are anti-vaccination. It is my obligation to come to you as neutral as I can manage. I'm a human being with biases and feelings and opinions, but in this context, it's my job to convey information to you as best I can and allow you to deduce what you think is the right thing to do. That's, as media, a middle conduit that conveys information, that is what it is my job to do. Multiple studies following people at least 15 months out from COVID infections have shown persistent antibody levels and memory B cells. Reinfections among those with natural immunity throughout the pandemic until the recent Omicron wave have been very low, less than 1%. A United Kingdom study of about 9,000 people with prior infections demonstrated higher than 90% protection against subsequent infections, even among those who had COVID more than 18 months previously. A new report of nearly 150,000 people with COVID infections in Israel, with about half vaccinated compared to the others left unvaccinated, there was an 82% lower risk of reinfection for people aged 16 to 64 years and 60% for age 65 or older. There was no difference for the protection with more than 1 dose of vaccine. The same was found in another study. Both of these were performed during the Delta wave, but now we have data with Omicron, the strain of the virus with the most substantial evasion of our immune system. Substantiating that, in Qatar, while the protection of natural immunity was about 90% for previous alpha, beta and gamma variants, it dropped to 56% for Omicron. In the United Kingdom, the risk of reinfection for people with prior COVID spiked to a level 16-fold what had been seen previously. Yet an Omicron wave study from Cleveland Clinic in about 8,000 people with natural immunity, 1 shot of vaccine, markedly reduced the risk of infection, and 2 or 3 shots had no incremental protective benefit. Of course, this cumulative data is not saying don't get vaccinated at all, but it does seem to suggest that natural immunity is very effective and could be supported at some point with vaccination. That, I suppose, is interesting because it's at odds with previous studies and, of course, begs the question, when will the CDC amend its policies around natural immunity and any subsequent measures or regulations that don't acknowledge the efficacy of natural immunity, which I know at points has been banned from discussion on platforms such as Instagram? Seems to me that this is the situation that needs updating in light of this evidence. That same finding was consistent in the Israel and UK studies. 1 shot did the trick, no added protection from 2 or 3 shots. If what this guy is saying is true, that 1 shot of natural immunity is for the best, and yet in most cases people were having 2 shots or 3 shots, does that make you wonder about the power of the pharmaceutical lobby? Because I can tell you who would benefit from there being 2 shots and 3 shots if you're charged by the shot. Big Pharma. I'm not suggesting some big conspiracy. I'm just saying that 3 times a number is a bigger number than 1 times a number. But one thing we know for sure is nothing like that could slip through the net because there's no such thing as Big Pharma lobbying and no one in Congress is invested in Big Pharma stocks. Which brings us to hybrid immunity. It would be reckless to ever recommend someone get purposely infected with COVID. However, for those who have sustained an infection, their immune response was directed to the whole virus, whereas our vaccines are specific to the spike protein. The result of combining different immune responses is synergy, more than additive, a powerful and durable protection, 25 to 100 times more antibody response, and broader against variants of the virus. Note that we do not have the same evidence for the opposite order, vaccination prior to breakthrough infections. It is now clearly overdue for the United States and the CDC to acknowledge natural immunity as a partial path to protection, as has been previously done in several countries. So I guess that is what the writer of this article is suggesting, that new data means that amendment in regulation is required. I, as a commentator, would add that the continual flux and alteration of knowledge, the shifting sands around these arguments suggests that it's unwise to condemn people who have a particular perspective. A little while ago, you couldn't speak about the Wuhan lab theory. A little while ago, you couldn't speak about natural immunity. Now evidence is emerging. Because of that, I think that we should be a little more circumspect before condemning alternate viewpoints, that we should recognise collectively we don't know all there is to know about this situation. As a wise monk said, we should repeat the mantra 3 times. I may be wrong, I may be wrong, I may be wrong. And on that basis, I acknowledge that I don't know what the right thing to do is. But I do feel that when there are censorial measures, when particular aspects of the conversation are shut down, when language and accusations of being a conspiracy theorist are thrown about, or people get accused of being anti-vax or right-wing, when we're still obviously in a formative phase of this conversation, I feel that's an unproductive way to regulate this discourse, that we need to be open-minded and indeed to follow the science and recognise that there are numerous vectors at play when constructing an ideology around this complex issue. The term fully vaccinated needs to be redefined. For people who have received 2 mRNA vaccine shots without prior infection, a 3rd shot booster is needed to protect against symptomatic and severe disease. On the other hand, for people with natural immunity with proof of a positive PCR test, 1 shot is all that's necessary to be considered fully vaccinated. Now again, that's that person's opinion on this. You might feel differently about that, and my argument would be all of these various feelings should be openly discussed. If these medications are effective, their efficacy will be proven in laboratory conditions, and we'll be able to have an open conversation about which pathway you would prefer. Not that certain information is promoted, other information is neglected. The CDC retains particular stances, even in spite of evidence that suggests amendment is required. That's the situation that interests me. The ability for us to have public conversations in an open manner about an evolving situation. By providing immunity certification in this way, the polarization between natural and vaccine-induced immune camps will be bridged, at least to some extent. It's also about sticking to the science when a large and ever-increasing body of data can no longer be ignored. By excluding natural immunity from the conversation, if this guy is right that 1 shot and immunity is the best protection, and I don't know whether he's right or wrong, then all that time where people were being excluded because they had natural immunity in 1 shot or natural immunity in no shot because the policy at that point was 2 shots, were actually in a better position. So it just shows that it's really worth accumulating and accruing a great deal of data, particularly before adopting a moral stance. I never had a problem with the medical aspect of this. I'm not a scientist, I don't claim to be, it's not an area of expertise. But I did have a problem with the condemnation and social damage and polarisation that the corporate media caused, that the government backed with the easy criticisms of unvaccinated or vaccine hesitant people, when now it emerges that potentially they weren't even right scientifically, the one thing they claimed that they had backing them. One can fully understand why vaccine mandates would be repudiated when there was evidence of protection conferred by infection. Now, as the virus evolved, we are at a time when natural immunity alone is not sufficient, but with a single shot, it's as good as 3. So what the author of this piece is suggesting is natural immunity with 1 shot is the perfect solution. Now, I don't know whether that's the solution or not. I don't have an opinion on that, but I will tell you it's a beautiful metaphor, because on one side you've had really pro-vaccine people, on the other side anti-vaccine people, and what's being suggested here is a necessary coming together, a removal of polarisation, not politicising a medical issue, coming together to accept that no one really knows and no one has the right to criticise or condemn other people for the decisions they make about their life. This doesn't affect the kind of decisions I'd make about my personal health or my family's health. It certainly doesn't lead me to make any suggestions about what you should do with your health. It informs me of one thing very clearly though. This is a situation that's evolving. There is more information to be revealed, and we should be tolerant, patient and open with people whose opinions differ from ours. If you're a person who's vehemently anti-vax and someone else is like, oh no, I'm the vaccinated up to the hill, you should be cool. And vice versa. If you're a vaccinated person who strongly believes in it and someone's not vaccinated, you no longer, on the basis of this article, have a pulpit from which to say, oh, what you're doing is irresponsible, you could lead to... That is no longer available as an argument because the situation is evolving. And I suppose one could conject too that regulation around lockdowns, access to premises, travel needs to be looked at through an evolving lens that includes natural immunity and many other factors which I personally don't have the capacity to fully understand because of my own limitations. But that's just what I think. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Give this video a thumbs up and a subscription. If you enjoyed this video, have a look at this one or this one. Remember, I'm live all over the country. Glasgow, Bristol, Plymouth, Scarborough. There's a link in the description if you want to come. It's a crazy and beautiful event to be a part of. If you want to sign up to our mailing list, you can do it with one click there. Most importantly of all, stay free.